Oh, that's real good. That is a 1776 chai latte. I'm drinking there, guys, in my Andy's Tears tumbler, which, of course, is the fantastic tumbler for anybody looking to truly, continually have a full cup. Andy's crying a lot today. He's very upset because word has gotten out about his mask mandate situation. We're going to be digging into that. We'll also be talking about House Joint Resolution 77, mask mandates, of course. Whole lot of pearl clutching, whole lot of gaslighting. And, of course, we're going to talk a little bit about Georgia's voting law. It's got nothing to do with Kentucky, but I do find it funny and interesting. With that in mind, guys, I thank you for joining me. Please feel free to hit that share button. Hit it right now. Hit it right now. I slave away behind this microphone for you guys. So please hit the share button. Share it with your friends. As we break it down, you can get a wonderful 1776 dirty chai latte at Brewed. You can also buy our coffee online at brewedco.com, BREWEDCO.com. You can also buy our merchandise on there or in store. I appreciate your guys' support, but let's get into it. Let's talk about the mask mandate and House Joint Resolution 77. Now, not technically, the House Joint Resolution 77 passed about 7 days ago. It's been in effect about 5-6 days, and we didn't post about it till Saturday. Now, why didn't we post about it till Saturday? Well, there's quite a lot of reasons why, but the number one is it is very confusing. I also was aware that it will probably be injunctified in the next couple of days, and so we didn't know if we wanted to post about it right away. But I said, what the heck? Everybody should know they don't have to wear masks right now, and if they're not wearing a mask right now, then they can go ahead. And I should let them know that legally right now you don't have to wear a mask. But I think I need to break down what's going on with House Joint Resolution 77 and kind of go through and break down what's going on in the court. So right now, for many of you know, Judge Shepard is who's presiding over the SB1, SB2, and HB1 cases in court. All those have to do with reining in the governor's power. And Judge Shepard, through some very shaky legal moves, has injunctified those bills. And explain what I mean here. So Beshear was the one who filed the case. The problem is you can't injunctify. Who are you injunctifying? So when you put a restraining order on something, when you're stopping something, what you're doing is you're saying that something needs to be stopped. Well, the parties listed are the AG and the legislators, and both the AG and the legislators don't enforce anything the governor does. So technically how this should have played out if the governor disagreed with these is he should have just been continued to make mandates, continued to go about it that way, and then whenever somebody challenges it in court or he tries to take somebody to court, he gets challenged for it. And then it would get knocked down or held up based upon his arguments behind it. But that's not what he did. Instead, he ran to Judge Shepard. For those of you who don't know who Judge Shepard is, let me tell you who Judge Shepard is. Judge Shepard is a partisan hack. And for evidence of that, for those of you who don't know, the governor chose, because you get to choose the judge you want, chose Judge Shepard to be the judge that swore him into office. Judge Shepard has been donated to by both Andy and Steve Beshear, as well as Amy Cubbage. Amy Cubbage is the head lawyer for the governor's legal office, which used to be the AG. They used to not even have one, but then the lawyer got his own. The governor got his own legal office, which I think we should probably knock that down. And that has cost the taxpayers quite a lot of money this year, over the past year, as he's lost case after case after case. Anyway, so Judge Shepard, the partisan hack, has held these up in court. Then enters a couple of laws, including House Joint Resolution 77. Now, what is House Joint Resolution 77? In order for when you guys look, you need to go to the LRC site and read it. Why? Well, the number one reason why you need to go to LRC's site and read it is because if you just Google it, it could take you to, I believe, Open Secrets is the second result if I Google it. The problem is Open Secrets has the original bill as it was filed. The original bill as it was filed was a shell bill. So it reads, if you read the first version, it was one page, and it literally just said, we say okay to all of his mandates. And that could alarm people, especially when I'm talking about it in this instance. But in this case, I'm not talking about it. I'm talking about the final article, which the final one had listed out the mandates that they agreed with. And they listed out all the mandates, the executive orders that were legal. Not one of them not listed was the mask mandate. Another was the occupancy restrictions and the other restaurant restrictions. So what you have is, when you read House Joint Resolution 77, it simply states, whereas 2021 Senate Bill 1 limited certain emergency executive actions and administrative regulations issued by the governor to 30 days unless an extension is approved by General Assembly. That deadline expired a while ago. It expired about a month and a half ago, and the governor didn't go to the General Assembly because, of course, he injunctified SB 1 through Judge Shepard. Now, what is more important to understand is, whereas a number of COVID-19, this is reading again from it, emergency executive actions, administrative regulations, or directives need to be extended past March 4th in order to protect the citizens of Kentucky. Now, this is the key sentence that you need to understand, because a lot of people sit there and say, no, it's 90 days out. It's not. No, 90 days out are the orders that they're saying are okay, will expire in 90 days. All the orders not listed, which include the mask mandate, are covered here in Section 1. All COVID-19 related executive orders, administrative regulations, and other directives issued by the governor pursuant to his authority, or agencies or boards under the governor's authority not specifically extended by this act, are of no further force or effect as of the effective date of this act. Now, the effective date of this act was about a week ago. So considering that the mask mandate was not listed in the approved mandates, that is how the mask mandate has been repealed with House Joint Resolution 77. So you make sure you read the final bill, not the shell bill. Make sure you go ahead and understand what the days are. Now, you got some people out there saying, well, you know, because including, we've even seen the governor himself sending out emails to child care facilities, because this and another bill has to deal with removing a lot of the child care COVID facility restrictions. And so he sent out a notice to all those people saying, we believe, this is the governor, saying, we have instructed the cabinet to keep enforcing our rules because we believe it's injunctified under Judge Shepard in his rulings about SB 1, SB 2, and HB 1. Now, if Beshear really believed that, why is it that on the 30th of last month, he filed court papers right after House Joint Resolution 77 and right after the other House bill that they're worried about that dealing with child care facilities? Right after they pass, the next day he files in court with Judge Shepard. If it is truly, Governor, being held up by the ruling already taking place on SB 1, SB 2, and HB 1, why did you feel a need to file again in court? Well, it's because it's not held up. By your own actions, you are making it clear that you do not yourself believe it's injunctified. So a lot of people ask, well, Andrew, isn't it just going to be injunctified like the others? Probably, most likely, it is on the docket. It was on the docket to be heard today. There has not been any rulings about it. We will probably have a ruling tomorrow about it. But however, the arguments on House Joint Resolution 77 will be really, really interesting. And here's why. In order to understand how House Joint Resolution 77 would end all other mandates, even without SB 1, SB 2, or HB 1, we need to rewind to 2020 SB 150 that passed in 2020. Now, why is that? Well, in SB 150, which was a COVID bill that passed back in 2020, it's got some interesting lines in it that I think are worth us going over. So, SB 150 in 2020 was passed in order to and the governor used it in his arguments in Beshear v. Acri, which is why it's of such interest, because the governor is going to have to argue against himself. Let me explain. Now, in Section 3, In the last page there of SB 150, it says, notwithstanding any state law to the contrary, the governor shall declare in writing the date upon which the state of emergency in response to COVID-19 declared on March 6, 2020 has ceased. In the event no such declaration is made by the governor on or before the first day of the next regular session of the General Assembly, the General Assembly may make the determination. What's that mean? Well, it means that when the General Assembly passes House Joint Resolution 77, are they saying, which I believe they are, and this is the argument, and this is why the mask mandate goes away, they're using their muscle to say, hey, we passed SB 150, which gives us the ability to end these things, and that's what we're doing with House Joint Resolution 77. Beshear, in his arguments against this, would have to argue, one would say, if he's being honest in his arguments, he'd have to argue that Senate Bill 150 is also improper. The problem with him arguing Senate Bill 150 is if we rewind to 2020 and Beshear and Beshear v. Akery, Beshear has ruled in his arguments, he says, listen, the legislators have the ability to end this state of emergency is well within my powers, and they have given me these powers. In fact, they even state it in SB 150. So the governor used Senate Bill 150 in his arguments as to why all his orders were constitutional in the first place, and now he has to argue against it to say that House Joint Resolution 77 is no good. Something you would say he obviously is going to have a hard time doing, but of course, we have Judge Shepard. And I fully believe the governor could simply say, I don't like it, and Judge Shepard would injunctify it. Now, naturally, you say, well, what can the legislators do? Well, the legislators, first, they should have impeached both Beshear and Judge Shepard while they were in session. They failed to do so. So that leaves us in a situation now where we have Judge Shepard. And you say, well, they can appeal it up to the Kentucky Supreme Court. Well, they did. They appealed the decision, and the AG did in SB1, SB2, and HB1, the injunctification, if that's the correct term, of the law. They appealed it up. They appealed it to the appellate court. The appellate court said, no, we're going to toss this right over to the Supreme Court right away. The Supreme Court is dragging its feet on this. Let's keep in mind, in the Florence v. Speedway case, that was dealing with taking away the governor's abilities and powers, that when a judge first ruled in the favor of the prevailing side, so against the governor, the circuit court judge there in northern Kentucky, when he first ruled against them, they then kicked it up to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court heard that case in 3 days. It has been over a month, and they still haven't picked it up. They are in no hurry to pick this up. I'm sure they're hoping it resolves itself because they're going to find themselves in a pretty sticky situation. Because quite clearly what Judge Shepard has done is far outside the bounds of law. And they're going to be forced to decide whether or not they're going to uphold their oaths and uphold their allegiance to the actual law, or if they're going to be partisan hacks. And remember, the Kentucky Supreme Court are elected individuals. So they're trying to time it out, maybe hoping Beshear ends this on his own and it doesn't become a situation. Though I don't think Beshear's going to do that. Let's keep in mind, there is still here in Kentucky curfews, mask mandates, and other things he's trying to put in place, even though House Joint Resolution ends it. So, you ask yourself, Andrew, why have I not heard mainstream media at all reporting on the lack of the mask mandate? I think for two reasons. One, of course, mainstream media tends to lean a little bit to the left. I think we can all agree. But more importantly, what I just described to you took 14 minutes of me speaking about different House Joint Resolution, different bills, and to explain the flow of things. How mainstream media, I don't think, understands how to talk about this stuff. They don't understand it. They can't talk about it. It's too confusing. It's very confusing. On top of that, just to have Judge Shepard injunctify it a couple of days after they post an article about it, they'll now have to do a lot of backtracking or have to write a new article. Now, why did I tell you guys about it? Knowing it most likely will be injunctified probably here in a couple of days. Well, first, I think you should know that you could take your mask off. if you were only not doing it because of the mandates. I think as well, I think you should know about it because if and when Judge Shepard injunctifies it, you need to know. You need to know what's going on in your courts. You need to know that the state House and the state Senate, the state General Assembly has passed not one, not two, not three, but right now by my count, 5, 6, if you count the budget that is also that he's seeking out to injunctify, 6 bills that the governor is asking a courts to put a hold on far outside what is proper and real. And then, of course, you ask yourself the other question. Now, the legal argument here that we've always said all along, and we had this legal case pending up in Northern Kentucky, and I'm not a lawyer, and I don't want you to misconstrue anything I'm about to say is encouraging you to break the law. It's not. But there is a legal argument that even the AG has made public statements about stating that because of the weird way this case is being done, that as these laws are being passed, they're not actually being injunctified from becoming law. And because if you own a restaurant or if you're a person in Kentucky are not named in this case, you now are free to operate by SB 1, SB 2, HB 1, House Joint Resolution 77, and so on and so forth. However, the question is if the cabinet, the health departments, all these administrators, the ABC, are still going to operate under this weird auspices of the governor saying, no. What we're doing is completely legal and disagree with the legal look at that. Are they really stopped? So we have a weird muddied water situation where we have a governor seeking to stop laws that he just disagrees with. He just disagrees with them. He doesn't even think they're unconstitutional. He just doesn't like them because they take away his power. And then using his power of the office to wage against the people because he's making up an assessment saying that he is within his rights. And then, we are pretty positive we're to go to court on this, like we are in court right now, that because we're not named parties, and because you're not named party to what's going on in Franklin County Court, it has no bearing on what you do, that any restaurant, any business could easily fight its way in court. But a business has to be willing to do that. And businesses, trust me, I'm a business owner. I was faced with losing everything. That's why I stood up, and that's why I fought. But if these businesses think there's still a slight way they can survive, they're going to keep laying down. They're going to keep laying down. And they're going to keep laying down because it's what's easy and it works. And they're just going to get by, and they're not interested in causing a lot of issues, and they're not interested in a lot of things. And until Governor Andy Beshear, and this is what's sad, even if it gets struck down in court, till mainstream media or Andy Beshear stands up there and says, nope, this is okay, they're going to keep doing this, which is the game they're playing. Why do you think Brood has not been targeted with any enforcement after we first went to court and embarrassed them? Because if they keep doing it and we keep surviving, it's going to encourage other businesses to stand up and say, hold on here. Brood is getting through this. Brood is surviving. Brood is standing up to you, and they're thriving, and they're doing great, and they're kicking your butts up and down because it doesn't make sense what you're doing. But instead, they're going to pick on things. Pick on the small guys. Pick on the little guys. Not that we're little people. We just happen to have a really good lawyer on our side, Chris Weiss. And all these legal things, I suggest you follow Chris Weiss. He did a real good post today on his personal page, Chris Weiss, here in Kentucky, where he explained exactly what I explained in long form and written form, so you can kind of follow along with what's going on. Now, earlier today, we made some posts about this. We made some posts about it over the weekend. And other than some initial pearl clutching, I guess a lot of people didn't know we existed. So if you're a first-time listener, first-time follower along to our page, I thank you. I thank you for joining us. Please hit the share button. Tell your friends about us. But one, that they were pearl clutchers, but two as well, pointing out that you're waiting for one man to tell you it's okay to think it's okay. Point in case. They're waiting for Andy to tell them it's okay. He's a lawyer. He's not even a doctor. You had 101 state legislators vote yes on House Joint Resolution 77. You had 101 elected officials telling you, no, you don't need to wear a mask. You're still waiting for that one to tell you it's okay. You cannot tell me you're not in a cult. That is the definition of a cult. When you are unable to think for yourself. Point in case, when most of these people are attacking us, you can simply ask them, okay, what number are you waiting for to take off your mask? And guess what? They don't have an answer. They don't know. They're waiting to be told it's okay by their rulers and their commanders and their cult leaders. They don't know how to look at numbers. They don't know. They have no clue. They're not able to think for themselves in the way of looking at it and saying, hold on a second. I mean, think about this. What kind of person still thinks masks work? They've been in place for like 10 months. And never once did we see a reduction due to masks. The only point we saw a reduction is when they started cycling lower at the same time that they put out the vaccine, which causes a problem of knowing whether or not it's the lower cycles or the vaccine that's causing a lower test count, but whatever. So we're seeing a lot of pearl clutching going on over this mask post. But what we're also seeing when it comes to these masks now is a lot of gaslighting. I'm seeing so much gaslighting out there on social media right now. I could literally save hundreds of dollars a month on my electric bill with all that gaslighting going on. There's tons of it. Literally, tons of gaslighting going on. What do I mean by that? I love these people sitting there being like, why do you care so much if people wear a mask? Says the person who has literally been in favor of government closing businesses because a person came in not wearing a mask. That's insane. You're sitting there saying, oh, why do you care so much if people are wearing masks or not? You've been demanding we all wear masks because you think it's about your safety. I have no problem if you as a private individual decide you want to wear a mask. I have no problem with that. What I have a problem with is when you start using government to demand it of others. And they sit there and say, oh, you can't follow some silly little health guidelines. Silly little health guidelines. There is right around 50 bars and restaurants in process to lose their ABC alcohol licenses that I know of off open records requests, specifically for mandate violations. They are losing everything. This isn't some silly little mask. These people are losing everything because the health department decided to cite them for some sort of mask violation or some sort of other COVID violation. They're playing for keeps. Stop pretending they're not. Do not gaslight me. Do not sit there and tell me they didn't just try to take my business from me back in November. It matters. If they weren't out there punishing businesses over masking mandates, I wouldn't care. But I do care. If it wasn't for a culture that leads people to be walking their dog outside alone, double masked, which I saw 3 times on my way over here to do this video, I wouldn't care. Why do I care about that culture? We all know the culture leads to policy. We all know it does. Stop trying to pretend it doesn't. Stop trying to gaslight us. We know what you're doing. We know what's going on there. Don't try to gaslight us about it. We got people losing their businesses. We still have capacity and curfews putting a slow stranglehold on some others. Just follow the... I saw so many people say, how hard is it to just follow some simple health guidelines? Health guidelines that said, close your door. Health guidelines that said you can't have enough people in here to be able to make a profit at a time. Health guidelines that said you had to close by 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, now midnight. It's currently at midnight. That's why I care. And then you have this NPR article coming out saying, well, we didn't have a lot of respiratory issues. Let's just keep masking. We didn't have a lot of respiratory issues with kids. We didn't have... Correlation does not equal causation. Because you know what we were doing also without masking? We were also not going anywhere. We were also not going to school. Kids weren't going to school to spread around diseases. And meanwhile, we were talking about no respiratory illnesses. First off, 0 people under 20, according to the CDC numbers, have died in Kentucky from COVID. We see far more than that in flu every year. I'm going to repeat that again. 0 kids under 20 have died from COVID in Kentucky, according to CDC. If 1 kid under 20 dies from getting this vaccine that's now been extended out to 16 years or older, 1 kid dies as a side effect, more children have died from the COVID vaccine than COVID. That's what's upsetting, and that's why it's a problem. It's a cultural issue. Yes, it does not affect me that you decide to double bag it while you're walking your dog outside. However, your culture demands me do it too. Remember, all along they've been saying, I need to wear a mask because I need to protect you from getting sick. I hate to tell you, but nobody in this world is responsible for your health but yours. It is of not my concern, nor should it be. Now, of course, we can be nice to each other. But mandating me concern about your health doesn't work. But on top of that, you've been telling me I need to mask up this entire time. Now, I make a post that says, hey, you can take the mask off now. And you freak out at me? You freak out at me for saying that because you're like, oh man, I thought you were about freedom. Hey, you wear a mask if you want to, but stop pretending for 5 seconds. Like that's all you care about. You want me to wear one too. You want to force me to do it. You've been trying to do it. You've been trying to take my business from me. You've been trying to take everybody else's businesses from them. You are taking people's businesses from them. Stop trying to gaslight me. It doesn't work. I've been through the trenches too much for you to tell me it doesn't exist and it's not happening. It's happening. I know people with mask exemptions that aren't able to get health care from their doctor because they won't see them. Yes, it matters. It matters so very much. So don't try to gaslight us. We know what you're doing, and you're suddenly pretending about freedoms. I love that too. Those people, oh man, I thought you were about freedom of choice and everything else. I am about freedom of choice. I'm not mandating you take off the mask. There's a big difference. I can hold an opinion without mandating it from you. But let's not pretend for 1 second like you care. It's like these people on these vaccines. They say, yeah, it's freedom of choice if this private business wants to incentivize taking a vaccine. But it wasn't freedom of a business to operate if it decided to leave its doors open just 4 or 5 months ago. Right? It's not just a freedom of a business then when you disagree with it. They try to use their own arguments against us, but then they don't even understand the nuance of them because they don't sincerely hold the beliefs. They don't sincerely hold a belief saying that, hey, I sincerely believe that I don't see any evidence that a mask work. I don't see any. The CDC's own study said they could only show at 100 days out a 2% decline in death growth rate. 100 days out from removal of a mask mandate, CDC study. But see, I can believe you shouldn't wear a mask without asking my government to make you take it off. And that nuance to that conversation, that belief that I can hold, that I say, hey, I think this should be one way as an individual without asking my government to do it. A belief that I can say, I think a marriage is a good thing. I think when 2 people get married and create a family, I think that's a good thing for society without asking my government to mandate it to you. I can think you wearing a mask is ridiculous. And I can think you double bagging it while you're walking your dog is ridiculous without asking my government to mandate you take it off. That's the nuance you don't understand because you don't hold the beliefs. You don't know what it means to believe in liberty while still having a moral compass yourself. You just don't want to force it on other people. And in the realm of talking about companies getting political. As many people found out that in Lexington, there's a very political coffee shop, and they just couldn't handle it. I love all the people being like, I'm never going to support you. I have literally been selling Impeach, Bashir, and Andy's Tears tumblers for like the last 3-4 months in there. You clearly don't support me. If you've walked in there and now you're shocked by what we're posting online, either that or you're blind when you walked in or you're just not paying attention. It is quite clear where we stand on a lot of things the minute you walk in, if you're paying attention. So don't pretend you're taking business away from me. I know you never came in. And trust me, if you feel strongly enough to comment on Facebook about it, when you come in and see those things, you're going to turn right around and leave. So speaking of companies getting involved politically, though, we have Georgia's voting law. Obviously, I've made a couple of posts about it, talking about Delta Airlines, which, by the way, hilarious, and the Liberty lover in me finds it so funny. So Delta Airlines comes out against the voting law the General Assembly puts in Georgia. So how does the General Assembly in Georgia, how does the General Assembly in Georgia respond? Well, they take away Delta's tax incentives to the tunes of millions of dollars, which I find hilarious. That is having a backbone. Oh, you got a problem with the voting law we passed? Well, I'm going to take away your tax incentives, huh? If you want to have that much opinion on what's going on with Georgia's laws, and you want to come out critical of us, why don't we just take away what we've been doing for you? And I think that's so funny. And I think that's so funny because it shows them what happens. You decide you want to get that political out there. You've been lobbying the government to give you handouts to the tunes of millions of dollars. You got a problem with what they're doing now? We can just take it away. Love it. I don't think they should be doing it in the first place, which is why I love it. Personally, I believe if you find yourself needing to give somebody a tax incentive to do business in your state, you need to cut your taxes for everybody because clearly they're too darn high. And a multi-million-dollar company doesn't need a tax break like the guy down the street, like the husband and wife living down the street working 9 to 5s need. They need a tax break, not a multi-million-dollar corporation. But, I still find it funny. Now, what is it about Georgia's law that's such an issue? Well, a dirty little secret, it's not that different than a lot of states all around the country. I took a good look at it. There's some different guidelines in there, but, it's got the same voting rules as a lot of, 20 other states have this same rule, 30 other states have this rule, 15 states have that. So no rules are really that crazy, but one. I'm going to tell you what that rule is here in a second. But first, I want to tell you what they've been saying about this here voting law. They're calling it Jim Crow 2.0, which I don't know how that might be the most racist thing I've ever heard. How is it socially acceptable for you to compare a simple voting laws to the same as Jim Crow law? Terrible laws that the Democrats in the South put in place to force segregation. To force segregation because the free market was already desegregating because, of course, if you're a business person, you don't typically care what somebody's skin color is because you know what? They're going to do business with you. And people didn't like that. So the Democrats put in Jim Crow laws. And now they're going to look at the Republican voting law and say that's Jim Crow 2.0, a new and improved Jim Crow. I'm sorry, does it say minorities can't marry white women? Does it say you can't eat at the same lunch counter? How can you compare the two? It is treating all of them exactly equally. And I don't understand how it's not one of the most racist things in the world to compare a simple voting law to be the same as Jim Crow laws. I don't get it. I don't see it. I don't get how that's not being called out. But what does it do that's majorly different? Well, the major difference it has that a lot of, I believe no other states have based on my research, is on mail-in voting. So the time frames and everything else for mail-in voting ain't that crazy. Ain't that different than everyone else. However, it does require one thing no other state does. Like I said, based on my research, I could be wrong. So if somebody knows of another state that does this, let me know. But it requires you to put your ID number on your mail-in ballot with your signature, and then they're going to do signature verification from your ID to your ballot. So basically, well, what that does is that guarantees, one, there is a law that says all ballots have to be treated the same. So one could argue, well, since you have to show your ID when you show up to vote in person, you should have to show your ID when you send in a ballot. So by putting your ID number on there, that's signature verified, and then they can compare that signature and be good about it. And what was the response to this? This is racist. It is racist to ask somebody to show an ID. First off, that's extremely bigoted of you to inform minorities can't get a license. But second off, can I remind everybody what else requires you to put your ID number on it? Your tax return. Your tax return requires you to send in your ID number on it. Are you telling me that the same policy for voting that we have for taxes is now racist? What sense does that make? Does that make any sense to anybody? You put your ID number on your tax return, but yet requiring it to vote is racist. So is it racist now to ask everybody to file their taxes? Because if we can get rid of filing our income tax returns because it's racist, I'm on board. I'm on board with that. I would love nothing more than not have to pay my taxes. Sign me up. I will take whatever excuse I need to for that one. So you fill out on your tax return your ID number, but because, and the only thing Georgia's doing massively different is requiring your ID number on your mail-in ballot. Now that's racist. Now I tell you this much. I don't know how you get through this world without an ID of some sort. I literally had to show my ID at least 3 or 4 times a week. Remember, an ID isn't a driver's license. You can go get an ID. You can't even fly without an ID. Is it now racist to get on a plane? Requiring an ID? You have to show an ID to do all kinds of things. Well, because of this, MLB pulled out its Major League All-Star game out of Atlanta, which is kind of funny as well, because this Democrat city now, because the Democrats were crying about requiring an ID number on your mail-in ballot, has now lost the MLB All-Star game from Atlanta, which is a majority-minority city and a Democrat-held city. So a Democrat-held city just lost millions of dollars of revenue that get brought in by these Major League All-Star games because they wanted the Major League Baseball to protest Georgia's voting law. Congratulations, you played yourself. You just cost your own Democrat cities millions in tax revenues and income to the city because you want to private companies to take a stand on something. Gosh, man. Gosh, you guys did not think that one through at all. At all. So, I don't know about you guys, but what I'm seeing is a whole lot of the culture war breaking out into the open. And it is a culture war. And culture does dictate policy, so it does matter. But remember, you can hold personally any view you want to. Liberty just means, and being for liberty, just means you don't want to force it on anybody else through governmental means. I thank you guys for joining me this afternoon. Remember, we are a podcast on Spotify and Apple, so you can share us there. We're on YouTube as well. Feel free to share us. Facebook, share us as well. I thank you guys so much. Check us out. We're in Lexington. Of course, also as well, you can check us out on brewedco.com, BREWEDCO.com. Thanks.